Hello, and welcome to our webinar, Address a Larger Market with Arcserve Unified Data Protection, brought to you by Arcserve. I'm your host, Katie Bavoso from the Channel Company. 2020 highlighted the need for critical investments in cybersecurity, especially in the face of multiple headline-making ransomware attacks. This year alone, more than 68% of businesses worldwide have been victimized by ransomware attacks. Your customers need cybersecurity solutions that do more than just protect against an oncoming ransomware attack. For more on this, I'm now joined by Janine Edwards, Senior Director of Channel Marketing at Arcserve, and Stacy Budd, Principal Consultant of Presales, also at Arcserve. Welcome to both of you, and thanks so much for joining me today. Let's first get started with segment one, a wider attack surface. So as the world generates more and more data year over year, what challenges come with storing and, of course, protecting all of that data?
I think that's a great place to start the conversation when we think about data. Data, quite simply, especially over the course of the past several years, has become the lifeblood of any modern business, any forward-thinking business of any size. And it's really at the heart of all businesses. It's everywhere. And I think that's because organizations realized that digital transformation was necessary to drive competitive differentiation and growth. And so when we think about data and we think about the modern organization who wants to propel their business forward, they see data as truly a business accelerator, understanding the data, measuring business activities against the data, right? Planning go forward strategies. So what we see as a result of this importance of data is kind of two big challenges. And the first one is frankly growth, right? This data deluge that we're seeing is insane. We're producing more data than we could think possible, right? So by the year 2025, the world is going to store 200 zettabytes of data, and half of that is going to live in the cloud. And another really kind of interesting stat when you think about how important this data deluge that we used to think was reserved for the enterprise, right, was really trickling down to midsize and SMB, is that 90% of the world's data has been produced in the last 2 years. Okay. The challenge that we have there is that a lot of the data being produced falls in the category of unstructured. Right? There's kind of two kinds of data, structured and unstructured. And the unstructured data creates a lot of complexity around data management for the mid-market enterprise, right? So it's very hard to predict, right? And you start to see storage management challenges. And this increase in capacity over time is not only tough to predict, but also very costly. And data is being generated, like we just talked about, constantly, like every second. And at some point in an organization, the disk space runs out. So, and we know that there's just a ton of hidden costs when it comes to managing data, and especially with this growth. So the more data you have, the more you have to manage, and that management becomes more complex. So when you hit the maximum utilization, okay, we have to spend more money, right? And so on and so on. So it's important to look for a technology that not only scales easily, has a huge cost advantage, and allows you to be more agile as it relates to storage management. And frankly, that's built on more relevant and modern technology. And that's the one piece, right? This data deluge. The second piece is, as we see organizations really moving increasingly to more of a digital world, cybercrime enters the mix, right? Especially ransomware. And I know we're going to talk a little bit more about ransomware in a second, but these groups, these people looking to maximize, profits by exploiting any vulnerabilities that come with this rapidly expanding ecosystem, have created this ridiculous, consistent, pervasive threat that, in my opinion, is just becoming an epidemic, right, in our ecosystem, especially for our technology providers. And everything has changed while nothing has changed, if that makes sense, right? So threats are elevated. These guys are getting more sophisticated. We've moved away from, a guy in a hoodie in the basement to this bold, brazen group of collaborators creating a full-scale enterprise by encrypting and exfiltrating data, right? And this new trend of holding it hostage and then threatening to expose it is just frightening. So essentially, when you put these two things together, this data growth tsunami and cybercrime, right? You have, simply put, more data to manage, more data to protect, and at the end of the day, probably more than we'd like to admit, more data to recover.
Let's now touch on the threat to the end user customer. How great is the risk of a ransomware attack, a data breach, or any sort of data loss to any sized organization? And what is the cost of downtime?
I'll go as far to say that I think that ransomware is by far one of the biggest challenges we've faced in the world of technology, right? And organizational growth and organizational security, not only for the customer, but for the outsourced solution providers, the resellers, the MSPs providing that customer with technology. Not a day goes by that we don't really hear about an organization getting hit with an attack, right? And the ones in the news that we hear about are the larger organizations. What about these mid-market companies and the SMB companies that don't make the news? I think the point being is that everyone is a target, small to large, nonprofit, technology vendors, tools and platform providers. The cost of ransomware is expected by 2021 to be $20 billion by the end of this year. That's what we're talking about, right? And by mid-year, the mid-year point of this year, we saw the ransomware costs already eclipse last year's, right? So, and the latest stat is that the cost of downtime is about $5,600 per minute. Obviously, that's skewed more to the mid-market enterprise, but that's even more scary for the SMB when you think about when they're down, right? The length of downtime sort of is comparable to the amount of money they're losing, right? And so once they don't get a handle on it, we're talking about the end of that business, right? So another stat I think is really, really impressive, but also scary, is a business is going to most likely fall victim to ransomware every 11 seconds by the end of this year. That's going to be the stat. And I get these stats from this blog called Cybersecurity Ventures. It's a super cool blog, has a lot of great reports. And I actually will check that and I'll say, oh, they predicted this. And then I'll go back and I'm like, oh, that was right. So if you don't know about Cybersecurity Ventures, or you should check it out. It's a great blog. And I think the point is that no one is immune, right? We think about some of the, organizations that play in the space, the Kaseya hit recently. And I don't bring that up to make them look bad or throw them under the bus, but it's alarming for all of the technology providers out there, right? For a couple of reasons. They're a huge software management tool. There was a huge payout demanded in that one. And the potential cascading impact on the technology providers that work with them, that was frightening. So again, point being is that no one is immune. And this epidemic is becoming something that I think we will continue to, fight. And we need to be ready for the modern ransomware attack. And, that's what I think should be on the minds of not only the technology providers, but also the vendors that partner with them to provide them the tools to fight this fight.
So we know that there's nobody that's immune. Everybody stands the risk of being attacked. The money that you have to pay to get out of these attacks is only going up, the costs related to that. So what do customers need to keep up with evolving and advancing cyber attacks?
Well, I think that's an interesting, question. As I touched on a little earlier, there's a different kind of cybercrime entity in the world right now, and these, they're getting more sophisticated and they're uncovering more and more vulnerabilities quickly, right? These zero-day attacks, and again, not just encrypting the data, but exfiltrating the data, holding the data hostage, and threatening to show it right on the internet. This leads to this, scary rising trend of targeting the backup, right? And I think Stacey's going to talk a little bit about that as well. So we want to educate partners and help partners educate their customers to ensure that the tools that they choose to protect their data, right, can not only protect it well, but recover the backup from this ever-evolving ransomware situation, right? This modern ransomware. So the question I always ask the partner when we're talking to partners is, hey, do you check with your customers to say, do you feel confident that your backup strategy, that your backup and recovery strategy is able to sort of, recover from modern ransomware?
A great point as always, Janine. Thank you. That brings us into segment 2, get to know Arcserve Unified Data Protection. First of all, what is Arcserve Unified Data Protection and what environments is it designed to protect?
Yeah, and thanks for having me, Katie. Great question there. We talk about unified data protection. Really, what it is, it's a solution that helps a customer protect their environments, whether we're speaking about data that's moved to the cloud with like Office 365. So many organizations have migrated their data up to Office 365 today. And then when we look at on-prem environments, right, that's ever evolving. We have physical, we have virtual, we have different hypervisors and things like that. So it gives you that ability with one platform to be able to take and be able to protect those environments without having a PhD, right? So being able to easily take and address and create a backup strategy, a recovery strategy, which is even more important for that data.
So, Stacey, with that said, what are the features, the key features of UDP?
I always fall back on my previous statement there that I think the very best and important feature is ease of use. Being able to take and being able to easily take and work with those different type of workloads and data sets that you have and be able to build a strategy around that. Now, when we come back to that, of course, being able to support things like immutability, being able to support features like source side global deduplication. So we're sending less data across the network. So we're writing less data to the storage and we're using that storage more intelligently from that perspective as well. Those are the things that are going to matter to a customer, right? How is it going to affect my my network, right? If I'm sending this data offsite to for instance, like to the Arcserve cloud, right, and something like that, is it going to efficiently going to be able to transmit in an amount of time, and then being able to tie that into a very tight RPO, recovery point objective, right? So if I am recovering from an event, right? Am I recovering from last night or am I recovering from an hour ago? Every customer has different requirements, different, I call it criticality of data, right? So being able to take and be able to dial that in in a way that is going to make it efficient and easy to kind of recover that data and of course build out those policies.
How does UDP stand out from competing solutions?
When we take a look at is there's some great solutions out there, right? I don't think anybody can really throw shame on other companies in this space that's doing that. But what we do very well, right, is again making sure that those backups can happen, quickly, efficiently. And at the end of the week or at the end of whatever time frame, we don't have to do a true up, right? As far as that goes, it can just keep rolling along with those quick, efficient backups from that perspective. Having, the integration with a security vendor like Sophos, right? And having that partnership that we have with Sophos so that we can make sure that the backup server itself that it can be safe from ransomware, from attacks like that, making sure that we have that unified cybersecurity and data protection integration within the solution. We're not trying to get into the security business from that perspective. We know what our lane is, and we're very confident with staying in that lane. And we think that partnering with somebody like Sophos just makes so much sense from that perspective. Let them be experts in their lane and let us be experts in ours. And overall, I mean, that's one area where we definitely stand out from our competition.
Absolutely, Stacey. So you touched on the ease of use of a solution earlier, that's really important to you and a really important feature. But how easy is it to integrate and scale UDP to customer needs?
That's one of the great things about the solution is I've taken customers that have, very small kind of environments, and all of a sudden they merge with another company, right? Or maybe they just have, explosion of growth, right? Their company really takes off. And the great thing here is if the environment changes, we go from Hyper-V to VMware, or we move over to Nutanix, or we start to move our data to the cloud and different things like that. or if it just becomes more and more systems, right? UDP is very good at taking that environment and growing with that environment, and the customer doesn't have much of a learning curve on how they're doing it. They're going to protect everything pretty much the same way. If they take and they move their data Office 365, for instance, they were doing more of an on-prem kind of email and SharePoint and those kind of things, and a new IT director comes in and we're gonna go to Office 365. That's a trend that we see, right? As younger and younger kind of directors come in, and you start to lose some of that resistance to the cloud. More and more people migrate to the cloud. Well, with us building out those plans, sure, we're going to choose that source data differently, but at the end of the day, leveraging UDP and using UDP, it's the same exact building out once you choose that source data differently. It gives them the convenience of not having to relearn a whole new solution because their data set changes.
Thanks so much for that, Stacy. Let's have you start us off in segment 3. Why sell Arcserve UDP? First question in this last segment: what is the value of offering a unified cybersecurity and data protection solution compared to stringing together multiple best-of-breed solutions to serve the same purpose? And what opportunity does this present your Arcserve reseller partners?
From a couple of different perspectives, right? Definitely from how it helps the partner. We'll go over that in a moment, but also from how it helps the customer. If we think about from the end customer perspective real quick, right? Having to reach out to um, multiple vendors because of different segments of whatever they're doing. We're in a world where everybody tries to get the best budget and best deal for the least amount of money. We also want to provide a good kind of price sensitive kind of solution as far as that goes. But when you start to piecemeal all these different pieces, what happens is all of a sudden I need to start engaging all these different companies when I have an issue, right? From that perspective. And how that trickles down to a partner is usually they're going to be reaching out to the partner for that as well. So they're going to be, we're having a problem with this or this and this, and and we're getting the runaround from this company and that company. And by having all that through one vendor, not only does it provide the better experience for the end user, but in relation to that, it's also going to provide a better experience for the partner as well. They're going to be able to offer a better value to the customer from that perspective. It is going to give them something unique that they can offer in the market that other companies today aren't offering from that perspective. So it also gives them the ability to come in when a competitor to them is offering, hey, we're gonna address this request with 3 different companies. In order to do that, they can instead come in and offer a solution through one vendor, right? Through us, to address all those different needs, and then that can make them more of a trusted partner as well.
Thanks so much, Stacy. So what support does Arcserve provide partners in relation to UDP?
Number one, our support model, it's a follow the sun support model from that perspective. So, a customer is going to be able to pick up the phone and they're going to be able to get support, right? And from what we're going to provide to partners, again, it's that pass through. If a company is having an issue and they're having trouble reaching out and connecting with somebody, they're more than likely going to go to their trusted partner that they've been working with, and they're going to, that's going to trickle through. So from a perspective of, being able to pick up the phone, be able to talk to a person, or be able to go on chat and chat with somebody, right? Maybe that's the quick answer to it from that perspective, right? Sometimes we don't need to actually open a ticket. Sometimes we could just ask a question from that perspective, and then be able to give that ability to do that, right? If it's a server down kind of instance, right? Being able to get that escalated quickly and get those responses quickly as far as that goes.
So what incentives exist for reseller partners who choose to offer Arcserve UDP?
When we look at incentives, I'm not going to speak to specific incentives here, right? But I'm going to talk about the general incentives, right? Because we're in a market that incentives are always kind of evolving from that perspective. But when you look from a technology incentive, well, I mentioned one before, right? When you're going into a competitive situation, there may be, a competitive situation where a customer has a quote from another partner and they're quoted out, a backup solution. They're quoted out a hardware solution to put that backup data on. They're quoted out a solution to move that data to cloud. So that's a third kind of thing within there, right? And then we can kind of keep snowballing as far as that goes, right? Because there's all these different pieces to the puzzle. And a lot of times we can come in, and I didn't even mention security, right? On top of that, let's not forget the security side of that to secure that. So there's 4 solutions right there. And when we start to look at that, right, how can I compete against that? Well, the easy way to compete about that is to go with a solution like Arcserve that can be one vendor, one solution to provide not only the point of contact for all that, but easier to quote, easier to kind of come in with one solution, and a lot of times be more competitive in pricing and different things from that perspective as well. So I would say that's the biggest incentive from that perspective. And then of course, all the different promos and different incentives that we have, that quite frankly, every vendor has those promos, right? So we really have to look at the core of it. And I think of just the incentive of being able to come in with a solution that just is easier to present to the customer and give the customer a better experience at the end of the day.
Thanks so much for that, Stacy. Janine, you're going to close out our webinar today with our final question. Why are channel resellers so critical to Arcserve, and what investments are you making in your channel partners?
We're 100% channel, and the channel community is everything to us, right? So partners, as far as VARs, in the case of the technologies we're talking about, larger MSPs, those folks, as Stacy alluded to, are the really the trusted outsourced technology providers for organizations of all sizes, even organizations that have an internal IT department. That mid-market customer is particularly ripe for recommendations and the deployment of technology, and that's because they're in growth mode. Like we talked about, they're embracing digital transformation, but they're also tight on budget, right? Especially when it comes to their technology SMEs, they have a lot of generalists. So we count on our partners to bring our solution to them and articulate the differentiated features and functionality, the cost effectiveness, as Stacy alluded to. They essentially represent our extended sales force to the organizations that absolutely need this critical technology, right? We work closely with the partners, and Stacy's a huge piece of this puzzle to educate the customer, right? And at the end of the day, frankly, land the deal. So our biggest investment, is innovation, so that we continue to bring, world-class next generation solutions to the customer together with our partners. So we're so proud of our alliance relationships, our technology partnerships. I think Stacy's going to go into this a lot when he talks about UDP and appliances and our relationship with Sophos. And that helps us bring that beautiful set of components from one vendor, right, to fight this modern threat of ransomware. I'll tell you that whether you're a larger VAR, whether you're a larger MSP, your operational maturity lever, one of those important levers, is standardization, right? The ability to create a portfolio of offerings that best, that you make the best margin off of, as it relates to an MSP servicing a mid-market customer, the ability to have knowledge base on that. Standardization becomes a critical lever in driving revenue, building profitability. And as Stacy talked about, we want to be able to bring you a one-stop shop based on whatever the right fit customer is, the right fit for the customer is, to prevent this data, ransomware from infiltrating and stopping, the productivity of business, right? So business continuity is our category, and that category, as we've talked about, is going to remain hugely critical and important. So we're going to double down. We're going to double down on our channel partner relationships to help solve that data challenge, right? Whether that's around pre-sale support, post-sale support, education, certification, right? Onboarding. That's where we're living. That's where we're going to continue to live. And we want to work together with partners to solve this data challenge.
That's going to conclude our webinar today. I'd like to thank Stacy and Janine for joining me for all their insights and expertise. And of course, thank you at home for watching our webinar, Address a Larger Market with Arcserve Unified Data Protection. Stay tuned because we're going to continue this conversation about Arcserve technology in the fight against ransomware. I'm Katie Bavoso. Stay secure and take care.